All right, good morning, history campers. I hope you all are doing equally as well as I am this morning. I wanted to talk a little bit about here with Unit 6 in this next chapter. We've been talking a lot about sectionalism, we've been talking a lot about slavery, but I want you to know that not everything is about slavery, obviously, that all the rest of this isn't happening in a vacuum. And so you have to pay attention to some other things. This will be the first of just two for this particular chapter. I want you to realize that we're looking at a second great awakening. And so religion is a huge thing at this point. And religion is always a huge thing when it comes to Americans and other folks, but it's especially huge here because that's part of what's going to color our ideals, color our movement, our spread westward. So I want you to think about a few things. There is an argument, religious wise, right now. One deals with the free will ideal. The idea being that according to religion, God has given you free will. He's given you the ability to make your own choices, to make your own decisions, and you determine your fate, you determine your future. That you have the ability to, in some cases, reject Him or accept Him. And free will is making your own decisions to sin or not to sin. The other big movement or the question is about predestination. And predestination, and some religions believe that everything is predestined. That if you go biblical, God can count, can number the very hairs upon your head, and so He has considered every decision you will make, and all your decisions are predestined. Because he knows where your heart is at from before the time you were born. He knows what you're going to do, and so your fate is predestined. And so there's a huge argument between the two factions. Now, you have to look at there's a lot of birth in the religious movement at this particular point. We're looking at a resurgence in deism. We talked about deism early on. The idea that there's definitely a creator being, there's definitely a God who designed the perfect universe, and He set it into play and left it to run. And He doesn't reach down and do miracles. He doesn't reach down and do adjustments because everything is as He intended. There's also the Unitarians and Universalists that are going to check in at this particular point. They believe, again, in this greater being. They believe in this structure and design. But, they're not looking at some of these sectarian, sectionalist beliefs that some of the other groups are, so they're not divided. They're looking at an overall picture. Another group that goes in here is going to be the AME Church, and really this is the birth of the modern AME Church. This version of the Methodist Church is the one that's going to reach across color boundaries. They're going to reach into the African American community, and they're going to welcome them. And so what's going to happen is when eventually we shift, eventually once we abolish slavery, this is going to be what becomes very much the black church. Yes, there's quite a few others that aren't, but this is going to be a home to the black church and spiritual awakening. And so that's huge. It talks as well about spiritualists. It talks about the Great Revival. What I like especially is it talks about the burned over district, those areas that were just burned over by the heat of faith, by the heat of Christ, that just kind of whipped through like a firestorm and ignited the hopes and the wishes and the beliefs of the people. And I thought that was a pretty interesting version of how to look at things. Another gentleman that comes in here, or a couple of gentlemen, is you start to look at the birth of a new religion. You start to look at the group of Latter-day Saints. Some folks are going to call them the Mormons, but if you talk to the church, it's no longer and never was a Mormon church. But we see the introduction of Joseph Smith Jr. We see the introduction of one of his major followers and the person who will take over as prophet leader of the church, Brigham Young. This is kind of important because they have a different set of beliefs. They are Christian, but they're going to go ahead and follow another book. Most Christians are going to look at the Old Testament and then they follow the New Testament. Well, the Book of Mormon is going to be a third testament that goes in with that. It gives further guidance for those lost sheep that Jesus was supposed to go forth and find at that particular point. one of the sticking points here is going to be the introduction of plural marriage. And they're not the first group to believe in plural marriage, nor will they be the last. Part of that is going to be about increasing the population, increasing the number of followers, especially when there's a shortage of men along the way. I'm not going to get into doctrine on that, but what's going to be important is they're going to be welcomed in some places and definitely unwelcome in others. And what they're going to do is they're going to pursue a new Zion, and they're going to go ahead and pursue to found the city. What they're looking for is Nauvoo. What they're looking for is a home for their beliefs, and they're going to push and be pushed westward. As they push and they get pushed westward, they're going to be responsible for opening up a huge chunk of the West. We know that they are going to end up in Utah. They're going to end up in the Utah Territory, and as this moves on, we're going to have a huge struggle between the beliefs and the faith of the church, and between the Constitution and the right to actually worship in your own way with your own decision. So make sure when you start to think about this that you go ahead and you bring in a few other folks. I see that the utopian communities with the Shakers and the Quakers are here, that it talks a little bit about free love and some of the other things. One of the huge parts of this will be that this religious movement will feed into the temperance movement. This religious movement will feed in to the abolition movement. We're going to be looking at a movement called moral suasion, S-U-A-S-I-A-N, suasion. And what it is it's using your religious beliefs to go ahead and persuade other groups of people, whether you do it through force of will, whether you do it through donations of money, whether you do it by attaching donations and help in with some of the other things you're offering. The idea is they're going to push their religious beliefs onto folks who don't necessarily believe the same way, and they're going to attach their ability to help with it. So there's a lot going on at this particular point, and this second Great Awakening is a huge part of this current version, and it's going to color how we believe and how we set out in some things. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cut this off here because I want to talk about a couple of other things in the second half of this, because we have to talk about romanticism. We have to talk about the idea of women working to achieve their equality, and I want to save that for the second version. All right, take care.